The Colorado sky stretched wide and golden above the rolling plains of Dawson Ridge, but inside the leather-scented office of West Hollow Ranch, the tension could have cut barbed wire. Graham Callahan leaned back in his chair, boots on the edge of his mahogany desk, arms crossed over a crisp button-down shirt that hadn't seen a wrinkle since sunrise. His dark hair curled slightly at the collar, sun-kissed from long days riding fence lines. A man carved out of tradition and legacy, and currently facing the biggest disruption of both. Across from him sat Ava Morgan, city-bred, and holding a law degree that made her smarter than most men in the county. Something she wore like invisible armor. "You're serious?" she asked, brows arching as she leaned forward. Her tone wasn't skeptical, just surprised. "You want me to marry you?" "Just on paper," Graham said, his southern drawl as dry as the August heat. "For a year, maybe less. Long enough to meet the terms of the will." Ava glanced down at the thick folder he'd handed her, the last will and testament of Gerald Callahan, Graham's late grandfather and the man who had raised him. The terms were simple. If archaic, inherit the ranch, but only if married, and not just to anyone, to someone outside the Callahan name. Someone not born into this life. "I'm offering you a deal," Graham continued. "I keep the land. You get financial stability. A cut of the profits. No strings, no expectations, just a contract." Ava closed the folder and sat back. "You don't want a wife. You want a loophole." He gave a half-smile. "Exactly. It was absurd. No, insane, but not altogether unexpected. After her father's death and a business partnership gone sour, Ava's career was stalled, her bank account gasping for air, and her future uncertain, when her cousin Brooke, who worked at the local courthouse, casually mentioned that West Hollow Ranch was hiring a legal consultant. Ava drove down from Denver with more curiosity than hope, and now she was being offered a fake marriage by a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a modern cowboy magazine. A very grumpy modern cowboy magazine. "You barely know me," she said, watching him closely. "You're not from here," he replied. "You've got your own life to get back to. And you don't care about this land." "You make that sound like a good thing." "It is," Graham said. "There's no mess, no drama, no ... emotion." Ava raised a brow. "Cold man, aren't you?" "I'm practical." She stood and paced to the window, where the land stretched out for miles, fences dividing pastures, cattle grazing in the distance, and the Rocky Mountains on the horizon. Beautiful, quiet, steady, so different from the chaos of her last year. She turned back to face him. "You really think we can pull it off? A whole year of pretending to be married?" "I know how to follow a plan," he said, standing as well. "Do you?" The air between them was still, sharp, and something about the challenge in his voice stirred something she hadn't felt in a while, not attraction, but something stranger, like the hint of a storm just beyond the ridge. Ava stepped forward and offered her hand. "All right, cowboy. You've got yourself a deal." He shook her hand, firm, no hesitation, and for a moment, his eyes lingered on hers. Not long enough to be romantic, but long enough to make her wonder what she was really signing up for. "Just business," he said again, almost like a warning. But neither of them realized then, the heart has no interest in contracts. It happened in a courthouse on a Tuesday morning. No flowers, no vows, no guests. Just a judge with tired eyes, and a deputy witness who looked like he hadn't had his coffee. Graham wore a clean button-down and jeans. Ava wore a navy dress she'd kept from her last court appearance in Denver. They signed the paperwork, exchanged rings from a pawn shop in Boulder, and didn't even bother with a photo. Just like that, Ava Morgan became Ava Callahan, and yet, walking out of the courthouse, her hand wrapped loosely around his forearm, she couldn't help but feel like she'd just stepped into a life she didn't recognize. "You okay?" Graham asked, opening the truck door for her. "Just peachy," she said, climbing in. "Every girl dreams of her fake wedding." He chuckled, a rare sound, low and warm. "Least it's over quick." Back at West Hollow, the ranch hands didn't ask questions. Word had already spread like prairie fire. The stoic cowboy had finally gotten married, and to a woman from the city, no less. Some offered polite congratulations, others stared. A few muttered under their breath about her not lasting a month. Ava ignored it. She was used to being underestimated. In fact, she preferred it later that night. After the wedding dinner, which was to take out burgers eaten on the tailgate of Graham's truck, they stood in the driveway beneath a sky full of stars. Crickets sang in the distance. Somewhere in the barn, a horse snorted. So, Ava said, arms crossed, how exactly does this arrangement work? We sleep in separate rooms, obviously, share a few dinners, make the occasional town appearance. He leaned back against the hood of the truck, thumbs hooked in his pockets. Exactly, we keep it simple, respectful. No games. She smirked. Not worried, I'll fall for your rugged cowboy charm. He gave her a sideways glance. I'm about as charming as a cattle fence. Point taken, they set the rules that night. No personal questions. No romantic entanglements. 1 year. Clean break. Simple. Except. Nothing ever is. The first crack it started with the little things. The way Graham made her coffee every morning, black just the way she liked it, without her ever asking. The way he'd leave notes on the kitchen table if he was out late, mending fences. The way he never once looked at his phone during a meal. Ava wasn't used to silence that wasn't awkward, or honesty that was in the performative one evening. She found him in the barn, brushing down a restless mare. His sleeves were rolled, forearms flecked with dust, a smear of hay stuck to his jeans. She stood in the doorway, watching without saying anything. You ever been around horses? He asked, not looking up. No, she said, stepping inside. Closest I got was a carousel in Central Park. He smiled faintly. You want to learn? She hesitated. What's the catch? No catch, just figured. If you're living here, you might as well meet the family. She laughed, a real, honest sound. You call your horses family. Some of them I like more than people. That night, she stood inside the stall, awkwardly stroking the mare's neck while Graham guided her movements. You're tense, he said. She's big, Ava replied. She won't hurt you, not unless you give her reason to. A beat passed. People like that too, she asked quietly. Graham looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something shift in his expression, something wounded, but gentle. Yeah, he said. Exactly, like that? They didn't talk about it again. But from that moment on, something unspoken sat between them, not love, not yet. But maybe the beginning of something more dangerous, trust. Fall came early to Dawson Ridge. The cottonwoods turned golden. The mornings crisp, and the wind carried the smell of hay and campfire smoke. The rhythm of ranch life settled in around Ava like a well-worn coat, a little stiff at first, but warming by the day. By October, she had stopped wearing heels entirely. By November, she could patch a fence post without swearing much, and by the time snow dusted the ridge, she no longer flinched when someone called her Mrs. Callahan. Because out here, the line between pretend and real had grown blurry. The Thanksgiving twist, they were supposed to spend Thanksgiving apart. Ava had planned to drive to Denver for a quiet weekend with a friend. Graham hadn't said much, just nodded when she told him, the way he always did when something felt personal. But, the morning of her trip, her car refused to start. Battery dead. Too cold, too early, too late to fix. Graham found her in the driveway, kicking the tire like it had insulted her. Guess you're stuck here with me, he said with a teasing smirk. She rolled her eyes. You sabotage my engine. If I did, I'd never admit it. They ended up eating Thanksgiving dinner at his sister June's place down the road. A raucous family gathering with too many kids, too much food, and questions Ava hadn't prepared for. So, how'd you two meet again? June asked, with a grin as she passed the mashed potatoes. Ava froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Graham didn't miss a beat. At the county fair, he said. She threw a dart, won a goldfish, and asked if I wanted to name it. June burst out laughing. That sounds like the most boring meet-cute in history. Fitting, Ava said, raising her glass. He's the most boring man I've ever married. The table roared with laughter. But when their eyes met across the gravy boat, Ava saw something quiet and serious behind his. Something real. Lines crossed that night, after the kids were asleep and the leftovers packed up. Ava helped Graham load dishes into the truck. You didn't have to lie, she said softly. You wanted the truth. We got married so I could inherit a few hundred acres and she could afford rent. Didn't seem like the kind of thing you bring to a family dinner. She watched him in the truck's headlights, that familiar quiet strength, that annoying calm. But now it wasn't annoying. Not really. What would you have said, she asked, if this wasn't an arrangement? He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, long and still. I'd say I got real lucky. She didn't say anything, didn't have to. The silence between them said it all. A winter warning back at the house. They passed each other in the narrow hallway, Ava with her wine glass, Graham carrying wood for the fire. Their hands brushed. She turned to look at him, So did he. No words. Just a pause. Just a question. Then he stepped back. Rules, boundaries, agreements, they both remembered, but neither of them realized. Boundaries only work when no one wants to cross them. And that night, when Ava lay awake in her room, listening to the wind through the trees and the steady rhythm of Graham's footsteps downstairs, she wondered why her chest ached in a way it never had before. She'd agreed to a marriage of convenience, but somewhere along the way, it had stopped feeling like pretend. Winter arrived in Dawson Ridge like a curtain dropping between acts, sudden and absolute. The ranch slowed under the weight of snow. Horses huddled in the barns. The lake froze in sheets of glass. Everything was quiet. Except inside Ava, something had started to thaw. Letters from a life. Left behind. Ava received a package in early December, a thick envelope postmarked from Denver. Inside were documents from her old law firm, papers she'd forgotten about, and a letter from her former boss. It was an offer. Not just any offer, a senior position. High salary, big firm. The kind of role she used to fight for. The kind of future she thought she still wanted. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, letter in one hand, a mug of chamomile in the other. Graham walked in from the cold, cheeks pink from the wind, snow dusting his jacket. He saw the look on her face. "You all right?" he asked, hanging his coat. "I got a job offer," she said flatly. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Big one. Big enough." He poured himself coffee and didn't sit down. "Congrats," he said. Silence settled between them like snowfall. Soft, heavy. "You're not going to ask me if I'm taking it," she finally said. "Not my place," he replied. "But she paused. "Your wife, right?" He leaned on the counter, staring at her. "We said no questions. No feelings, no mess." Her voice cracked. "Then why does this feel like all of the above?" Christmas lights and frozen moments later. That week, they attended the Dawson Ridge Christmas Festival, a small-town tradition with bonfires, cider, and tree lighting. Ava hadn't planned to go, but June showed up at the ranch, kids in tow, and declared it mandatory. "People need to see you two together." She winked. So Ava bundled up in a red coat and scarf, and Graham wore his usual black, and they walked hand in hand through the snow-dusted fairground like a couple playing house, except it didn't feel like play anymore. Under the glow of the Christmas lights, he looked at her differently, and she let him. They stood beside the bonfire, flames dancing in their reflections, and for a moment, one brief, breathless moment, he reached for her gloved hand, and laced his fingers through hers. She didn't pull away. Later, when the fireworks started, he leaned in close and whispered, "Thank you for staying." And then, just like that, he kissed her, soft, slow. A question disguised as a touch. A kiss that tasted like wood smoke and secrets. A kiss that neither of them meant to happen. A kiss that broke every rule. The fallout they didn't speak on. The way home. Ava stared out the window, heart pounding like a drum. Graham gripped the steering wheel like it might save him from himself. At the ranch, they stepped out into the snow. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "That wasn't part of the deal?" "No," she whispered, barely able to look at him. "It wasn't," and she walked inside, not knowing what hurt more, the kiss, or the fact that it finally made her realize what she stood to lose. She'd come to West Hollow for convenience. She hadn't expected to fall in love with her fake husband, but that night, as snow fell quietly outside her window and his footsteps echoed once again on the floor below, Ava knew. She wasn't pretending anymore. Winter's grip tightened over Dawson Ridge, and with it came shadows neither Ava nor Graham had expected. Unwelcome visitors one cold morning. Just after sunrise, a sleek black car rolled up the dusty road to West Hollow Ranch. From it stepped a man in a tailored suit and cold eyes, Lucas Dane, a lawyer from Ava's old firm, but more importantly, someone who carried a reputation for stirring trouble. He handed Ava a letter on official notice that a legal challenge had been filed against the Callahan estate. "You might want to read this," he said, voice clipped. The letter claimed that Gerald Callahan's will was invalid, and that the ranch was to be placed in court until the dispute was settled. It was signed by a powerful corporation, one that had eyes on the vast land and rich resources beneath it. Ava's stomach twisted. "This can't be happening." Lucas smirked. "Welcome back to the world you left, Mrs. Callahan. Looks like your marriage just got a lot more complicated." Trust tested that evening. Ava laid the letter on the kitchen table. Graham stared at it for a long time, jaw tight. "This isn't just about the land," he said quietly. "They want to break us." "Us?" Ava asked, confused. He looked up. You and me. Together. This deal, this fake marriage, it's the only thing standing between us and losing everything. Ava swallowed hard. What do you want to do? Graham's eyes held a fierce determination she'd never seen before. We fight, and we do it as a team. The breaking point days passed. The tension between them thickened like the winter fog. Old habits returned. Sarcasm, stubborn silences, and those stolen glances filled with questions neither dared to ask aloud. One night, after a long day of meetings and phone calls, Ava found Graham on the porch, staring at the stars. She stepped beside him. We're going to have to be honest, she said. He nodded. No more pretending. Their hands brushed, then intertwined. We don't have to be just a contract anymore, Ava whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile that warmed her soul. I was hoping you'd say that. The road ahead, the fight for the ranch had begun. But Ava and Graham knew it wasn't just about property. It was about claiming their future together, and for the first time, they faced it not as strangers, bound by convenience, but as partners, bound by something much stronger. The bitter wind howled through the canyons of Dawson Ridge, rattling the windows of the old farmhouse. Outside, snow swirled in thick drifts, burying the fences and blanketing the earth in white silence. Inside, the fire crackled, but the warmth was nothing compared to the heat between Graham and Ava. A battle on two fronts. The courtroom was packed. The air tense as lawyers volleyed arguments and evidence. The Callahan estate was on trial, the future of the ranch hanging by a thread. Ava stood beside Graham, her city-slicker legal knowledge clashing with the harsh realities of rural politics and corporate greed. Lucas Dane prowled the courtroom like a predator, his smirk sharper than the judge's gavel. Every move he made was calculated to undermine them, to fracture the fragile alliance Ava and Graham had built. During recess, Graham grabbed Ava's hand. They want us divided. Don't give them the satisfaction. She squeezed back. We're stronger together. Confessions by the fire that night. As the snowstorm raged outside, they sat close by the fire, faces glowing in the amber light. For the first time since their agreement began, the walls they'd built around their hearts began to crumble. I'm scared, Ava admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Not just about losing the ranch, about losing you. Graham looked at her, the weight of years in his eyes. I didn't think I wanted anyone, but you. You changed everything. She reached for his hand, fingers trembling. Maybe this marriage of convenience was never just a deal. He pulled her gently closer. Maybe it's the beginning of something real. The night that changed everything. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The house was plunged into darkness except for the flickering firelight. A knock echoed at the door. Graham rose, alert. Who could that be at this hour? He opened the door to reveal a breathless ranch hand, face pale. There's trouble at the north fence. Someone's trying to tear it down. Without hesitation, Graham grabbed his coat and his rifle. Ava followed, heart pounding in the storm. Shadowy figures worked furiously to break through. Confrontation was inevitable. Graham stepped forward, voice low but commanding. This land is ours. You're not welcome here. The men froze, then fled into the blizzard. A promise in the storm back inside. Soaked and shaken, Ava and Graham stood close. The storm outside a wild echo to the storm in their hearts. I won't let anyone take this from us, Graham vowed. Neither will I, Ava replied. Their eyes met, unguarded, and for the first time, the silence between them was filled with hope and something much more. Spring arrived slowly at Dawson Ridge, melting away the snow and revealing the scars left by winter's fury. The ranch bore the marks of struggle, broken fences repaired, muddy tracks replaced with fresh gravel, much like the fragile bond between Ava and Graham, tested but unbroken. The final hearing. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Today would decide the fate of West Hollow Ranch. Ava, dressed sharply but with a new quiet confidence, stood beside Graham. They faced the judge, the opposing counsel, and a room filled with locals who had watched their story unfold like a wildfire. Lucas Dane, the relentless adversary, presented his last argument, a final attempt to wrest control from the Callahans. But Ava was ready. She spoke with clarity and passion, weaving legal expertise with heartfelt testimony about the ranch's legacy, the land's value beyond dollars, and the family it had built, including Graham and herself. When the judge finally rendered the verdict, silence filled the room. We uphold the validity of Gerald Callahan's will, the judge declared. West Hollow Ranch remains in the hands of Graham and Ava Callahan. Cheers erupted. New beginnings outside the courthouse. As sunlight warmed their faces, Graham pulled Ava close. "We did it," he said, voice thick with emotion. "We did," she replied, eyes shining. He smiled, brushing a stray hair from her face. "So what now? The contract's over." Ava laughed softly. "I think it's just the beginning." He kissed her then, not a contract kiss, but a promise. Love that lasts. Back at the ranch, under the wide open sky, they stood side by side, watching cattle graze peacefully. "We built more than a life here," Ava said. "We built a home." Graham took her hand. "And maybe, just maybe, I found more than I ever thought I could." Ava smiled. "A husband," he grinned. "A whole lot more." As the sun set behind the mountains, their hearts beat in sync, no longer bound by convenience, but by something real, lasting, and true.